Here's a question that sounds like a joke but isn't. What's the difference between a medieval football match and a bar fight? The answer is, a bar fight has a closing time, because for roughly 500 years football had exactly one rule: don't kill anyone. And even that one was more of a suggestion. In medieval England, football meant something closer to a town-wide brawl that happened to involve a pig's bladder. Entire villages would turn out, men, women, sometimes hundreds of people, chasing a ball toward goals that could be miles apart. A church door, a manor wall, a stone marker across the river. Games lasted from sunrise to sunset. There were no teams, no positions, no fouls, and no particular reason not to throw your neighbor into a ditch if he got in your way. In 1280, a player in Northumberland died after running onto another man's dagger during a match. Which tells you two things: people brought daggers to football, and the game continued anyway. Kings hated it. Edward II banned football in 1314, Edward III banned it twice, Henry VIII banned it, Scotland's James I banned it, France's Philip VI banned it. Football was banned more often than any activity in medieval Europe, and it made absolutely no difference. The game was too popular, too embedded in local culture, and frankly, too much fun to stop. Royal Shrovetide football in Ashbourne, Derbyshire is still played today. 2 teams, goals 3 miles apart, no limit on players. It looks exactly like what it is: a 900-year-old tradition that no monarch could kill. So how did this glorious chaos become the sport we know? The answer is English boarding schools, and a problem nobody anticipated. By the early 1800s, boys from all over England were arriving at schools like Eton, Rugby, Harrow, and Winchester, each carrying football traditions from home. And every school developed its own code. Eton had the wall game, played on a narrow strip alongside a brick wall, so brutally low scoring that the last goal in its big annual match was scored in 1909 by a student who later became Prime Minister Harold Macmillan. Rugby school lets you carry the ball. Charterhouse, hemmed in by London streets, developed a passing game because you simply couldn't tackle anyone without hitting a wall. When these students reached university and tried to play each other, chaos returned. In 1848, representatives from 5 schools sat down at Cambridge and hammered out a unified set of rules that they posted on trees around Parker's Peace. No copy survives, but the real showdown came 15 years later. On October 26, 1863, men from 11 London clubs gathered at the Freemasons' Tavern to settle football's rules once and for all. A solicitor named Ebenezer Cobb Morley ran the meeting. The debate was ferocious, and it came down to one question: should you be allowed to kick your opponent in the shins? A man named F.W. Campbell of Blackheath argued passionately that hacking, deliberately kicking opponents' legs, was the soul of the game. Ban it, he warned, and a bunch of Frenchmen could beat English teams with a week's practice. He lost the vote 13-4. Campbell stormed out, took his club with him, and eventually helped found rugby. Everyone who stayed created association football. 2 global sports, born from one argument about shin-kicking in a London pub. Morley wrote football's first 13 laws, published in December 1863. And what's remarkable is everything they left out. No referee, no goalkeeper, no set number of players, no match length, no penalty kicks, no crossbar, just 2 posts with empty sky between them. The one thing the rules did specify: no metal studs or iron plates on your boots, which tells you exactly what people had been wearing to matches up to that point. What followed was the most extraordinary 3 decades in the history of sport. Between 1866 and 1897, football essentially built itself from scratch. The offside rule was loosened in 1866, allowing forward passing for the first time. Goalkeepers arrived in 1871, though initially they could handle the ball anywhere on the pitch, which must have been fun. Tape between the goalposts gave way to a proper crossbar. A referee's whistle was blown for the first time in 1878, made by Joseph Hudson at the Acme Whistle Company in Birmingham. Before that, officials waved handkerchiefs and shouted. In 1874, a Nottingham Forest player named Sam Weller Widdowson, named after his father's favorite Dickens character, cut up a pair of cricket pads and strapped them to his shins. Everyone laughed. FIFA didn't make shin guards mandatory until 1990, but the biggest fight of the era was over the penalty kick. An Irish linen manufacturer and amateur goalkeeper named William McCrum watched defenders deliberately fouling attackers near the goal with 0 consequences, and proposed a radical solution: a free shot from 12 yards. English critics dismissed it as the Irishman's motion. The captain of Corinthian FC called it a standing insult to sportsmen. Corinthian protested by refusing to take penalties awarded to them and ordering their goalkeeper not to save any taken against them, because apparently gentleman's honor was more important than winning. The first penalty was scored by John Heath of Wolverhampton Wanderers on September 14, 1891. The game hasn't been the same since. By the 1920s, football had a new crisis. The three-player offside rule had been weaponized. Newcastle United's Bill McCracken perfected an offside trap so devastating that referees were blowing their whistles 40 times a match. Goals vanished. Fans stopped showing up. In 1925, the rule was changed. Now you only needed 2 defenders between you and the goal instead of 3. It sounds like a tiny tweak. It detonated the sport. Goals in England's First Division jumped from 1,200 to 1,700 in a single season. On the first day under the new rule, Aston Villa beat Burnley 10-0. Dixie Dean scored 60 league goals in 1927-28, a record that still stands. And Arsenal's Herbert Chapman invented an entirely new formation, the WM, to cope with the new reality. One small rule change. An entire sport reinvented. Fast forward to 1966, the World Cup quarterfinal, England versus Argentina at Wembley. The German referee sends off Argentine captain Antonio Ratin for, and I quote, looking at him with bad intentions. Problem: the referee speaks German. Ratin speaks Spanish. Neither understands the other. Ratin refuses to leave for 10 minutes. FIFA's head of referees, Ken Aston, has to walk onto the pitch to sort it out. That evening, driving home, Aston stops at a traffic light on Kensington High Street. Yellow, red, and just like that, the card system is born. A solution so elegant it transcends language. Yellow cards and red cards debuted at the 1970 World Cup. Not a single player was sent off the entire tournament. 7 days after the Ratin incident, the 1966 World Cup final produced its most famous controversy. Jeff Hurst's shot hits the crossbar, bounces down, bounces out. The referee consults the Soviet linesman. Goal. England wins the World Cup. Later analysis showed the ball never crossed the line. It needed another 7 inches. That ghost goal haunted football for decades. In 2010, Frank Lampard's shot against Germany clearly crossed the line by more than a foot. Not given. England lost 4-1. FIFA president Sepp Blatter, who had spent years opposing technology in football, finally cracked. I have to say thank you, Lampard. Goal line technology arrived in 2012. But arguably the most transformative modern rule change came 20 years earlier, and it had nothing to do with computers. The 1990 World Cup was terrible. The worst goals per game average in tournament history. Teams passed back to goalkeepers who would pick the ball up and hold it forever. In 1992, the back pass rule banned goalkeepers from handling deliberate kicks from teammates. Overnight, goalkeepers had to learn to play with their feet. Time wasting collapsed. The entire foundation of modern pressing football, the high press, the sweeper keeper, everything that makes the game dynamic today, traces back to this single rule change. Today, football is governed by technology that would have baffled anyone who played the game even 20 years ago. Semi-automated offside technology, introduced at the 2022 World Cup, uses 12 cameras tracking 29 points on every player's body 50 times per second, combined with a sensor in the ball transmitting 500 times per second. It generates a 3D skeletal animation showing exactly who was where when the pass was made. VAR reviews goals, penalties, red cards, and mistaken identity. The debate isn't whether technology belongs in football anymore, it's how much is too much? Here's what strikes me about all of this. Football's greatest innovations almost never came from the people running the game. The penalty kick came from an Irish linen manufacturer. Goal nets came from the engineer who later built the Mersey Tunnel. The card system came from a man stuck at a traffic light. And every single one of those ideas was resisted, mocked, and delayed, sometimes by decades. Goal line technology was rejected by football's lawmakers as recently as 2010, before being unanimously approved 28 months later. The pattern is always the same. A problem festers. An outsider proposes a fix. The establishment fights it. And eventually the fix becomes so obviously right that everyone pretends they supported it all along. Football has been reinventing itself for 800 years. From pig bladders in medieval streets to AI tracking limb positions in Qatari stadiums. The only real rule The only one that's never changed is that the game keeps moving forward, even when the people in charge would rather it didn't.